So welcome back to week 3 of digital liturgies. We have 8 weeks to go through this, and I want to just thank everybody for your continued patience as we continue to build off of each week. So it's really important for us to remember that as we prepare to come into these classes that we're able to do the readings, because the presentation or the information that we're going to be bringing is just meant to help supplement that. It's not to necessarily recap all of it. So, and keep in mind too, I said this week 1, my hope is that we create space to talk about what the digital habitats are doing to us. And I think that's Kevin's hope as well. But before we jump into 2 and 3, we're going to recap. We're going to continue to step into repetition as much as we can. Week 1 slide is up here. That's the social media uses algorithms, variable reward systems, and novelty to exploit developing brains to continue to gain and maintain attention for their profit. And it results in the 4 foundational harms that are listed up here: social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction, as well as the distortion, distraction, the dislocation, and the disembodiment. Continuing to spend more and more time. We heard 7 hours a day, 49 hours a week, 2,548 hours a year, over 10,000 hours over the course of 4 years. That has structural and shaping powers. So before we continue to swing on, though, I think we've gotten a lot of head nods about algorithms, and oh yeah, I've heard that term. And you really, I've learned best that in order to understand the term, you have to be able to define it in your own words. And another way of doing this, if you come up across terms that you're hearing, try to define it to a kid. Try to define it to your child. That'll help make sure you understand it at its basic level. So the algorithm is nothing more than a series of instructions or prompts to accomplish a particular task. And in this instance, the algorithms that's being used, the task they're trying to accomplish is to gain and maintain attention or engagement. And that has the side effect. And just continues to funnel you more and more towards your desired content. Remember this slide from last week? Yep. So we have some terms up here as well that we just have to continue on with this vocab recap. The theology of embodiment, that is that we believe we were created by God in God's image, and we have good givenness in that way. We have the embodied self. That's the physical person you are in the chair here today. How you look, talk, walk, act, think, all of those embodied features. We have this term up here, expressive individualism. This is basically the belief that the most important thing in accomplishing in life is that you are happy, that it's about your happiness. We have the technological revolution, and that's this belief system that is built around enhancing our embodied experience through technology. And then we also have the disembodied self, which is the other piece here. That's the other person, or the other profile, or the other avatar, or maybe even the other artificial identity or intelligence, that is usually carefully curated in order to gain and maintain some of your attention or engagement. And then we have that digital line, that bottom line, which is the digital epistemological environment, and that just refers to the fact that that space, that digital habitat, has shaping powers. It influences how we think, feel, and act. I've had so many situations in my office that have been come in with specific digital epistemological environmental impacts, if I could say it that way, digital stuff that happens at work. People are reading work emails back and forth to me, and they're unpacking this hurt that occurred, and halfway through them reading it, and they're reading their response, they catch something about it. In the embodied experience, they catch that I would never say or do this if I had a face-to-face meeting with that person. That how I worded that email was pretty harsh or sharp or single-minded. Whereas if they were to have that exchange in an embodied interaction, it wouldn't be that way. So it's sneaky in that way. Spent enough time on that. This is the summary slide of last week. All of those things combined leads to disembodiment, dislocation, distortion, and distraction, which undermine biblical wisdom. And the other piece to wrap up before we continue on is that we believe James' main hope in this book is that we be reoriented reshaped, reconnected by the wisdom of God rather than the web. Sounds good? You guys are getting a hit of that every week. I'm sorry if you're like, oh gosh, this again. We're just trying to drip it. So the key piece here that I don't think I emphasized enough last week is that his argument is that we can only respond well as Christians if we understand the digital habitats of today. Not only how they shape us, but how they fail us. Because all of that digital relationships that are being created, they're shallow and they don't fulfill. And that gives us an opportunity as Christians and disciples of Jesus to show what a fulfilling relationship looks like. So that's that key piece I don't want to forget. We're going to step into Kevin's time to share here, the 3, maybe, are you good with that? 3 deep reflections from Kevin.
Yeah. Yes, my voice is coming back. Thank you, Terry. All right. On our book, on page 50, I have on the second full paragraph, the word repetition. And I just think about how much you use your phone, the word repetition. Page 50, second paragraph. Repetition, as much as it exasperates, is important. It can make us better at something. It can make a person remember faster and recite better. But most amazing of all, repetition can actually change the kind of people we are. It turns out that in God's providential design, in our bodies, repetition has the astonishing power to reshape our minds, to recalibrate our desires, and even redefine our beliefs. As we immerse ourselves in something time and time again, our thoughts, feelings, and intuitions begin to align with whatever that is, especially if it's the internet. So whether you know it or not, your phone is influencing how you think and what you think about. And if you are on your phone X hours per day, whether you know it or not, you are being shaped and changed. As you use your phone for hours and hours and hours, it absolutely changes us as people. And see, the thing that's so challenging for Joe and I, Joe just told me a horrible story about something happened in his business last night as a counselor. If Joe and I told you the stories of our community with what's happening via our devices, if we told you the stories just straight up, you would all be in tears, or you'd be absolutely, you would never believe us. So repeated use of our devices has an incredible impact on us. So think about that. How often, how much you use your device affects you. The next, page 53. Just one sentence. It's the third full paragraph, second sentence from the end, third paragraph. Devices and practices that alter our habits of speaking and reading consequently alter our habits of learning and thinking. It is these technologies that tend to have the most power over us. Look at the first sentence. Devices and practices that alter our habits of speaking and reading. Alter our habits of learning and thinking. So give me an umbrella of mercy. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm going to just tell you what's happening to me with my phone. So for about 15 years, our church family gave me 1 month to study and pray and think. I told you last week I learned to speed read in 1974. In a month, I could read 300 books. So I would just immerse myself for 18, 20 hours. I mean, I would just read and read and read and learn and learn. I've been using a phone for about 7 years. I cannot read like that anymore. To read fast, you move your eyes, not your head. So I could move my eyes so fast. I was reading this fast. That's how fast I could read. Now I can't. Now I have to read like this, my finger. Line by line. My phone, I was a crazy, I cannot read the way I used to because of my phone. So hours and hours, repetition on my phone is changing my brain that I cannot read the way I used to. And I'm a professional reader. I was. That's why I said, you laughed at me last week, I'm learning to read poetry. I hate poetry. I don't like it. Why? I have to retrain my brain because all I want to do now is scroll. You give me 1 hour on my phone, and I would typically, in the morning, I'd probably go through 50 or 60 places in less than an hour. And I'm just picking up stuff like crazy. And then if I want to open my Bible, the Lord is my shepherd. Thinking over here. It's changing my brain and how I read. So here's the third one, last one I give to you on page 56. Last paragraph on page 56. This is talking about Nicholas Carr, which we'll come back to. There's a dark side of the equation, and then we talk about Carr, the last sentence. Our habits drive certain values deep into our hearts and change the kind of people we are. Physically, this change is very real because our brains are plastic, and our brains form new neural pathways in response to our behavior. And these pathways shape our desires and intuitions. The question then becomes, what happens to us if our habits, what we're repeating over and over and over, are not positioning our hearts toward God's truth, but towards something else? And so the sentence, you are what you scroll. I am what I scroll. So my son played in the NBA. I was scrolling whatever team he was playing. I was scrolling all the time. And all I could think about was that basketball team. Now he's not playing in the NBA anymore. I hardly watch sports. I hardly think about that. And I'm asking the Lord to help me think differently. So 3 words. Repetition. What we repeat affects this. What happens here affects this. And it affects how we live with each other. Joe?
So the first thing that stuck out to me from my deep reflections was I remember the movie Inception. On page 34 is where I'm going to go to if you want to find that. The reference to Inception. He goes and talks, in the world of Inception, dream sharing is not just a tool to invade someone else's mind. It's a way to construct one's own subconscious reality. With training, sleepers can learn how to change the content of their dreams at will. However, this intoxicating ability erodes the sleeper's sense of what's real and what is a dream. As the dreamers port more and more of their desires and memories into the dream environment, they become increasingly immersed in the world of the dream. Not only does this immersion confuse their sense of reality, with tragic consequences in the case of one character, it recalibrates their desires entirely. So as they invest more and more of themselves, it leads to more and more confusion of their reality. This metaphor works really great for me because A, I like the movie, and B, it makes some really great connections to the distorting nature of the immersion that happens in digital technology. I want to take this moment to share with you, maybe not quite a reflection, but just a little bit of information as a result of my phone call last night. There are artificial bots, AI bots, that exist out there where their whole purpose is to replicate human interaction. I want to share with you about 2 companies. One is called Replica, the other is called Character AI. Replica has over 30 million users. The whole purpose of Replica is to mimic human interaction and to provide nothing more than positivity back, nothing more than affirmation. When we live in a throwaway culture where we want to get rid of anything that makes us uncomfortable, this makes sense why we have 30 million users on this app. The other one is Character AI. That's designed to provide human-like interactions, but it's got a twist of fantasy in there. It mimics human interactions, but with fictional characters, like from your favorite movie. Or imitations of real people, dead or alive. So you could be chatting with George Clooney, or you could be chatting with George Washington. The bot has downloaded all the information to create a realistic back and forth with that person's personality. This is scary. It's not necessarily just targeted specifically to people who are interested in that, though. It's being advertised in a lot of different ways. And part of the phone call that I just experienced was a story of a 9-year-old girl who was playing on her iPad. And long story short, basically she got involved in an advertisement on this game. And she engaged in conversations out of curiosity that were harmful to her. This is a digital immersion, and we have risks everywhere in that context. And it comes from that technological revolution of thinking we need to enhance or create somehow a human interaction that's better than what humans can give, which is complete crap. There's so much in this, though. There's money here. In Character AI, Google has just forked over $2.7 billion to Character AI's former founder to license the technology, who's a former Google employee. $2.7 billion to license the tech, and then to bring him back on the team to lead Google's AI efforts.
Catch the story? 9-year-old child talking with whom? Make sure you get your head around this. This is the world our children are being raised in.
All right, let's bring it out of here. Page 61 is my second point. Page 61, as our brains become accustomed to nonstop input, surface-level engagement, and hurried scrolling from one bullet to the next, the reality of neuroplasticity kicks in, as Kevin was talking earlier. The sensations of distraction and mental weightlessness become the new normal. It's not just that we think like the internet, it's that we act like the internet. He continues on page 61 to go further. What's more is the internet's most important intrinsic feature, such as search engines and algorithms begin to think for us, our attention span thins and our capacity to do deep quality reflections diminishes. We begin to depend more and more on the web's tools of efficiency and attention grabbing than we do anything else. My point that I want to lift off of here, my reflection, is that there's actually some psychologists out there who don't believe our attention spans have lessened. They actually believe that our expectations to be entertained is what's changed. I'm going to say that again, make sure I said it right, because it's not that the attention span has shortened, it's that we expect to be entertained every second. That's what's changed, according to some psychologists. I just think that's interesting. It's more of an impatience with boredom than it is an inability to focus on something. Page 63 goes on to further this case, and he says, I'll give you a second to get there. It's like one page over. The default in much of Western culture is to rely on internet technology to fill the gaps in our hearts and minds. This is one of my favorite sentences in the whole book. Our spiritual and intellectual menu is held by technologies that are designed not to help us savor what we find, but to ensure that we binge and binge again. So keeping in mind that digital environment is creating dopamine-dependent people. And I've seen this play out in my office time and time again. One of the hallmark symptoms of depression is that we lose a sense of pleasure or enjoyment in a task we used to. Right? We've heard that before, maybe. Well, I think this is a symptom of depression, but I also think it's a symptom of overexposure in technology. Because the more we hit that dopamine here on Instagram, we don't get that same type of dopamine exposure in real life. So real life becomes more and more dull. Does this make sense to everybody? Dopamine is the chemical that makes you feel... I'll do that again. Yep. First time I did that. You do it if people do it. Dopamine is the hormone or chemical that makes us feel good or happy. Yes. So if I'm getting hit with dopamine, which makes me feel good on my phone, scrolling through Instagram is going to win over strolling through the hallway. Right? A drinking fountain doesn't hit us with dopamine. Seeing our chemistry teacher doesn't make us feel happy. So if we're used to being hit with that 7 hours a day, how long is a school day? 7 hours. So that's where my thought goes here. And I'm running over on time. Want me to skip my last one? Just punt it. Yeah. All right. Swing it back to you guys because we want to make sure we have time for you to be able to share your deep reflections, and we've been asked to make sure we have more frequent table conversations. So share amongst your table something that stuck out to the reading. We'll circle back in a minute or two. Got about 1 minute left of your conversations. Yikes. All right, welcome back. Seemed like conversation was going well, so I let you guys run a little long. We're going to move ahead here. One piece I just want to highlight is that this digital environment does shape how we learn, it shapes how we communicate, it shapes how we consume, and it changes how we relate. It has become the foundational medium, which we have here up on the board. It's become the foundational medium in which we experience and live life. So I ran through this last week. I can't run through it, but I have to let you know we have the technological revolution from the 20s on here. So over the last 100 years, it's gone from infiltrating our ears to infiltrating our actual biology with transhumanism. And I got a point in here. Hang on one second. 3 things I want you to do, because I can't go down this rabbit hole here today. It'll be a whole hour of that. If you're interested in understanding what I mean by merging with our biology and transhumanism, just read pages 40 through 44 again. Google Stuart Brand's legacy, his past, his present, and his future, where he's headed. And then go ahead and just poke around a little bit on Elon Musk's most recent Neuralink that he's done, implanting a chip in a brain.
Quick question, Joe. So why are you so interested in Stewart? Just give him a quick, why do you want them to read Stewart?
Oh, you're giving me the green light. Okay, cool. Stuart Brand is basically like one of the key influencers of a lot of the 60s technological revolution. So we'll just say it this way. Steve Jobs really looked up to Stuart Brand. And he referred to Stuart Brand's work, the Whole Earth Catalog, as the Bible of his generation. So Steve Jobs, who's the iPhone guy, was a disciple of Stuart Brand. That's why it's important to understand Stuart Brand's piece. Is that good enough? Cool. And with all this continued enhancement, though, it's changing our world. And so we move on here to understand that if it changes our world, then it changes our brain. And if it changes our brain, because spiritual teaching tells us we can't separate our brain and our spirit, then it impacts our spirit. Does this make sense to everybody here? Yep. So on page 44 is when he highlights how it's changed the world with the clock or the jet airplane. It creates systemic changes that influence society. Everybody was here, well, half of you were here at 10:30 because the clock, right? Clock has changed things. Tech is he's gone on to make points about how it's changed the brain, and as a result, look, we cannot separate the brain from the spirit. So he goes on to say that this is actually a bigger risk than we think, because a lot of this stuff has gone under the radar from an evangelical perspective. A lot of Christians have gone the I want to avoid unhealthy content route, so therefore I am going to be okay. They have not been able to acknowledge that the medium itself, even if you are exploring all healthy content, changes and shapes you in some way. You could spend all that time on that medium looking up good things, looking up Bible verses, looking up all sorts of great things, but it's going to shape you in some way. One of it's going to get you accustomed to getting something right here, right now. That's just one way. And so I don't think we want to be dismissive of the harmful facts that there's content that's really going to bring us out of that positive place, but we can't just look to be digitally pure. Purity is not going to be the solution here. It's going to be understanding the medium actually has shaping influence. So the real risk is that we were unaware and we underestimated the shaping power of the medium. He goes on page 62, and this is going to kind of push us a little bit forward here. The values that the web imparts to us, the ones that the chapters leading ahead will point out, the digital liturgies, they color nearly every day of our lives. They are basically create the tapestry of our culture. So we have to understand that to show Jesus to this world today, we have to understand how this digital environment is coloring the world. Liturgies are the habits that form us, leading to value and desire certain things over others. Keep that in mind as we move forward. This next slide here, we're actually going to have you do something a little different. We'd like you as a table group to engage with the section titled The Haze. And this is Dean and Erica's digital selves. We're going to give you a couple more minutes you could either read through it as a table group, or you could say what stuck out to you about this section. And the little bit of a link from last week was, if all I see is blue news and blue comments and blue Facebook posts, I'm going to think blue, and vice versa. So go ahead.
Let me jump in, Joe.
Yes.
So if you don't have the book, it's two people who are different online than they are in person. Dean is a more liberal, Erica is more conservative. How they are in person is very different than who they are online. And so in those pages, he describes what happens to these two people because of their immersion on the web.
One minute warning. Okay, welcome back. We want to make sure we balance conversation with just walking through some of the content that we have here. So my takeaway from this section is when we continually use our devices as the primary medium to live life through, it trains our spirit to dislocate, to distance, to unplug ourselves from God and from others. It trains our spirit to answer to the frequent beck and call of our technology and fragments our attention. It trains our spirit to question or distort biblical truth that's been true since the beginning of time. And it trains our spirit to see ourselves in our own self-created image rather than the image that God's created us in. So that's a little bit of what Dean and Erica's digital selves lifted for me. And we'll move on to You Are What You Scroll. This is a big slide here. Kevin kind of hit on this. Jump in when and if you want. We can't stress enough how the environment shapes us. I know you guys are saying, wow, we're repeating that a lot. Page 48 up here on the slide, this is when we choose to see our reality, what we choose to see as our reality. What's interesting about this quote is what we choose to see as our reality. What we choose, what we pick to say is true, shapes us in that reality's image. And I think when I read this the first 3 or 4 times, I brushed right over that. So what we choose to see is what we begin to be shaped by. The spiritual and intellectual haze that we feel, that they talked about in the haze, is the feeling of thinking, feeling, and believing more like our technologies. We become what we worship, and this is the part that I like, and what we're worshiping has a mind or an agenda of its own. Luke 6:45, a good man brings up good things out of the good that's stored in his heart, and an evil man brings out evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. This is what we've been hearing from the pulpit time and time again. What our eyes and ears take in dwells in the heart, and what comes out of the heart through our thoughts, words, and actions is what we see. You are what you scroll. And this is the part where if you aren't a social media person, you might be sitting there thinking like, I got out free on this one because I don't scroll anything. It's not necessarily what it means. Recently, I'm a big hockey guy. If you know that about me, I build a hockey rink in my backyard. If anybody else is a hockey fan, you want to come skate, I got a warming house, I got a rink, we got music going, 2 full-size nets, we get buzzing out there. It's a great time. But when I mow the lawn, I like to listen to, or I used to like to listen to, hockey podcasts. And what I found was I was choosing to listen to the hockey podcast, and what I was hearing and what I was taking in was changing how I acted, how I thought, how I acted, the words that I chose, how I spoke to people and about people. That changed me. And so I could choose what I wanted to pump in, and it came out. So it's not just scrolling that changes us. It's the medium itself, and it's also the content. So we're going to kick it back to you again. You are what you scroll. Do you agree with this statement, or do you not? Discuss with your table groups. This one's going to be a brief one, about 60 seconds. Go ahead. All right. Let's bring it back. Kevin and I were just talking about just all the different mediums in which we experience life through. And I'm a Vikings fan, which is just a cruel way. Any other Skol brothers in here? Yep. Anyway, yeah. Yep. And I would get overinvested. I'm fair to say I would get overinvested. So is Josh Smith over here. I know that. And there would be moments that I just had to mute the game. I had to mute the game and turn off at least one of those inputs that gained that frustration for me. Because when an announcer takes a bad take and my team's not playing well, boy, it gets me. But I'm just trying to be a little bit transparent with you. It's not just social media, it's just everything, and it all affects that heart piece. But now I'm going to move back to ripping on social media for a second. This is a screenshot of an internal Facebook presentation, courtesy of whistleblower Francis Haug from 2021. The left that you see there, that snippet, is the speaker notes of the image that's being provided to you. Okay, I'm going to read that real quick. Teens' decisions and behavior are mainly driven by emotion, the intrigue of novelty, and reward. And while these seem positive, they make teens very vulnerable at the elevated levels they operate on, especially in the absence of mature frontal lobes, which help with impulse control. Right? Right here. Teens' decisions and behaviors are driven by emotion, novelty, reward. They're vulnerable. They don't have impulse control. Sorry, I don't know how to jump from side to side. This is what we have going on here, specifically to get you to scroll and to stay in scrolling position. They use what's called the hook model, which is up here. Remember, you maybe want to jump in here at some point. So the hook model is basically taking Skinner's approach from the 1940s of operant conditioning, and they're mashing it up with technology. And so they're putting in the dopamine drips. They're putting in this a way to invest themselves in the technology, which is sort of like that part earlier that I read about, where they're porting more and more of their desires in. So the algorithms continue to get updated. Jonathan Haidt walks us through this really awesome. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, but I am going to read it. He says, step one, just the mere thought of a possible reward triggers the release of dopamine, and dopamine makes us feel. Thank you. Yes. She feels a craving and wants to go to Instagram immediately. So we start to get that anticipatory response that we talked about from week 1, the saliva production, so to speak, when I said lemons, right? Step 2, she goes and finds that nobody commented on her post. Does she stop pressing the lever? No, she continues to press. So she continues her search for more reward. So she starts looking through her old posts, her DMs, or anything that shows that she matters to someone else, or at the least bit, something to entertain her. She wants the treat, so she stays engaged. As she continues to wander down her feed, leaving comments for her friends along the way, variable reward systems are taking over here, right? Investment also gives that person an opportunity to put themselves in the app by having their own personality in their profile and their interactions and their followings. It gets them to continue to come back. So after investment, the trigger for the next round of behavior may actually become internal rather than external. So we don't need a push notification to go to Instagram. We just need that little bit of dopamine. Does this make sense to everybody? Yikes. Yeah? Okay, there we go. So the trigger brings the action. The action is in search of the reward. The reward itself allows you to invest yourself. It's the belief that somehow your interactions can influence how big the reward is. Did I do that well enough? Did you want anything else to add?
In the slides near the bottom, we had a sentence. Once the user's own feelings are enough to trigger a behavior that gets variably rewarded, the user becomes hooked. When there's enough variable reward, the user becomes hooked to this. That's why we're on our phone 7 to 10 hours a day. We are hooked on this. The phone is designed to hook you. It's designed to make you an addict. It's designed to take your money. And it's designed to make you sad.
And we have this, actually Kevin read this quote earlier, the one from page 50 that just says that repetition, it makes us better at something. It also changes who we are. The more and more we immerse ourselves, our thoughts, feelings, and institutions begin to align with whatever that is, especially if that thing is the internet. This is true in a lot of ways. Those are ants on the screen, by the way. And the reason that I have them up here is because I work with ants every day. And so what I mean by that is I work with people who have developed automatic negative thinking. Automatic negative thinking as a result of repetition. It has created habitual thinking or seeing the world through a negative light. Does this make sense? Automatic negative thinking is ants. So as we continually engage with social media or with digital technologies that tell us life isn't good enough without X, Y, or Z, or you aren't good enough in X, Y, or Z way, what does that do to our brain? Even as an adult, what does that do? And now put yourself in a position of having a malleable frontal lobe. What does that tell our kids? I'm not good enough, or I'm not pretty enough. And it's gotten to the point, I'm not trying to go too rogue here, but it's gotten to the point where kids they can't step foot in school because their anxiety levels are so high and their automatic negative thinking is so ingrained that they think they shouldn't even be there. So although that's pretty dark, there's actually really great hope in this too. If repetition creates habits, and habits influence the habitat of the heart, then what we choose to be repetitive with will result in good habits. Does this make sense? And what our kids are exposed to will result in good habits. So, this is ants. Ants will take root. You put your kid on Instagram, they will have negative thoughts about themselves. They will struggle with comparison. They will think life is less pleasurable. They will be comparing themselves to every other athlete out there in the world. And guess what it's going to become a focal point in their life is whether or not I am good enough. What does God say about being good enough? Go. Yeah, express. Do you want to go there? Me? You guys, what is expressive individualism? Define it in your own words at your table groups. Because if we can't define it ourselves, then we don't know it. All right, we got to hit the gas here, so I got to bring it back. Anybody brave enough to shout out their definition of expressive individualism? Josh Smith, perhaps? Nope. Anybody define expressive individualism for me?
Sure, I'll try.
Go for it.
Everything of value is within yourself. It's how you define what you think you are, what you want. It's all in here. Forget the outer world because it's all in here.
Yeah, it's all about me, and what is valuable is what comes from within. Wonderful. Thank you very much. It's Lyle, right? Thank you, Lyle. Yeah, this expressive individualism is being fed so much by social media. It's become saturated in our society, and you even look at pro sports, and it's all about me, right? It's my touchdown dance or my celebration or my shoes. So it's just really allowed this branding to happen. That's been huge. So we want to try to move towards understanding this shallows piece. You want to punt on this? This one? You're punting on this one too? Are you Iowa Hawkeyes here or what? Oh my gosh. Yes. It's okay. It wasn't a fair catch. Okay. We've heard from some folks that all of this awareness has been helpful, and there's this wanting to have some sort of action step that's available. Like, what do we do with it, right? And so I spoke last time on Justin Whitmel Early's book, The Common Rule, which you can find right here. He has a whole book that he's written on this diagram right here. This diagram outlines for you some really actual actionable steps that you can take to, how do I want to say this? To cultivate a healthy habitat of the heart. Okay, it's a whole book on habits, and what we learned about habits is habits shape the habitat of the heart. So there's the love God part, there's the love your neighbor part, there's the embrace God's creation part, and then there's the resist the things that pull you away. The 4 daily habits you can see up there. Kneeling prayer, morning, midday, and bedtime. That was new to me. Kneeling prayer is not something that I grew up with, and so that felt very strange. It almost felt inauthentic, but it's something I've come to enjoy. Those are the daily habits. That's the one clicks I think we want to move towards, is trying to find habits that feed the relationship with Jesus. I think James wants to be careful about this too. You notice he doesn't tell a lot of technical things in his book. This is what you have to do to get better, or this is what... He's very cautious of providing you with things because I think he's afraid of it being interpreted as a purity thing, like, oh, just become digitally pure. It's more about understanding the habitat of the heart. For us, though, what we've been spending the first 3 weeks on is this concept of awareness. So we've hit it hard. You guys are probably getting tired of hearing it, but it is the digital environment that impacts us. It's the water in which we swim in that impacts us. So we have hit awareness, 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 and before we can have action steps, that awareness leads to this reflection piece. What is my relationship with technology? Do some self-audits on this. Who do I follow? Where do I spend my time? When do I spend my time on it? What am I saying yes to? Let me say it this way. Every time we say yes to something or someone, we're saying no to something or someone else. So every time we say yes to work, we are saying no to, put in whatever, family, friends, prayer perhaps. I want you to keep track of your yeses and your nos. Do a self-audit. Reflect on it. Are we connecting when we're on our phone, or are we consuming? That's another audit that you can do. Are you connecting, or are you consuming? So remember, you become what you worship, and you are what you scroll. Hopefully, in reflection, it can lead us to this place of motivation and conviction. And through motivation and conviction, this is where we are able to look back and say, what is the repeated behavior? What is my repeated relationship that I'm doing over and over and over again with my device? what is it doing to me? What is it doing to my kids? Do I like that? Do I want to continue? What do I want to experience that's different? And then, before we get to action, we have to understand we're going to be attacked by the enemy here. This is the part where the enemy throws everything and will just shell shock us. How's your week been? Yeah, mine's been toast. Screwtape Letters does a great job of this. I love C.S. Lewis, big fan. I got the book up here. Chapter 13 talks about this exact thing. I'm going to just summarize it for you. So if you haven't read Screwtape Letters, Uncle Screwtape, he's the dude down in hell. He writes letters to nephew Wormwood, who's assigned a patient, which would be a person, who his job is to tempt to keep him away from the Lord, from having a faith or relationship with Jesus. Uncle Screwtape in chapter 13 is writing to his nephew, and he's upset because his nephew has allowed the patient to go for a walk. It's allowed the patient to take a break, to read a book, to slow down, and that has renewed his faith or reconnected him to reality there is. And that has reconnected to him to seeing that he's been placing things and efforts in things that really aren't valuable. He's been exposing himself in liturgies that tell him value is in something other than what it is. Then he goes on to say, your job as the devil is to make people drift away. The best way to deal with that renewed faith is to prevent him from converting his feelings of repentance and remorse into action. As long as the patient doesn't put things into action, he remains in a fallen state. So right now, you will get ramped up with absolutely every attack you can think of to keep you from putting actionable steps in places. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to get absolutely shell-shocked, but it's going to be little mental excuses like, oh, I use it for work, or, oh, it's just how I like to unwind, or whatever it is you've convinced yourself, or your tempter has convinced yourself, to be the reason for why you continue to do that. I use it to keep up with family. So just know that there's a portion here before you can get to action that actually has to do with conviction. Then we get into the place of action with repetition, micro adjustments, moving towards developing a healthier habitat of the heart so we can be a better representation of Jesus. You become what you worship, you are what you scroll, so it matters what's in your feed. Make sense? Yep. I say that, one of the things that's important to know, I say does that make sense? Or I say, do you know what I mean? I say that a lot. I was a middle child of a divorced family. I wasn't seen a lot. I mean, of course, I was seen by my mom and seen by my family members, but when I had something to share, I always wanted to make sure that they heard me. And so you'll notice that I'll do that up here because I'm looking for affirmation from you guys to make sure that what I say is being heard. That comes from my childhood. The action steps here, we've given you some. Leaving your phone at home on Sundays, that's a hard one. I'm hoping maybe some of you have engaged with it. The other one was one resource to look up the Hang 10 movement. Another one was to encourage embodied experience, which would be having fellowship with your family in a rush-free space, screen-free space. I had a discouraging disembodiment experience or sharing with you guys last week, going out and getting an alarm clock. That's in efforts to get the phone out of your room. This week, we have 3 more clicks for you. One would be to sign up for the Culture Translator if you'd like to. This can be found at access.org. This helps keep people who aren't in the 7 hours a day social media world privy to what's going on. The second click is to encourage embodiment. Do you want to talk about this one? Nope. Go for a walk. Go for a tech-free walk. Take your time. Listen to the birds. Experience the weather. And the third one, discourage disembodiment. Just go through your phone and turn off unnecessary notifications, right? So, reminder for next week, we actually step into the digital liturgies next week. Chapter 4, My Story, My Truth, We got to read pages 65 through 89. I would encourage you, if you have the time or resources, to read through it a couple different times even, because something else lifts each time I read it. Yeah. Close in prayer. Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you just for the opportunity to have conversations, to share just some information, but also to spend fellowship with other believers, Lord. I pray for protection over everybody as we go through here and we begin to put awareness and reflection and motivation all together in hopes that we can take some action steps as we continue to read this book and we learn how to be cultivating better heart soil so those seeds can grow, Lord. I ask that each person here is walking away with a sense of direction and a prompting. And I just thank you for Jesus who died for our sins and allow us to experience just wonderful relationships here on earth. And thank you, Lord. Amen.